Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. So lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Yes, there's been a sudden change in guest, and there's a very good reason for that. Tonight we welcome back Joost Strydom from Arania. Isaac van Zyl has been ordered to rest by his doctors, so will not be joining us tonight. Please pray for Isaac. I'm hoping that Dr. Philippe van Veilbergen can join us later as a second part of this live stream after we've chatted to Joost from Arania, so we can discuss the do's and don'ts of people who have had heart surgery. Before we get onto the subject of Arania, this happened earlier today in Vermeulen Street, believe it or not. This is in the heart of Pretoria. Strikers were apparently dispersed. Let me just get this up for you guys. Strikers were apparently dispersed by the army firing live rounds in a city in Pretoria. Absolutely extraordinary. Let's have a look at the footage. Okay, there you see it, hot off the press, happened today in Pretoria. Now, tonight we're discussing Arania, that mystical little town on the banks of the Orange River in the Northern Cape. It is now under threat. Let me explain why in a video.
And South Africa's Afrikaner-only town, Orania, must fall. So says the board chair of the Harry Gwala Foundation, Panyaza Lesufi. He says Orania isn't inclusive or a symbol of democracy. Lesufi was speaking during a wreath-laying ceremony at the grave of struggle icon Harry Gwala. Ian says Pamandla Gorke has got this report.
In the Karoo Desert of the Northern Cape lies this whites-only establishment, Orania. It was founded in 1991 as apartheid was coming to an end. The town has been the subject of intense debate for years. Now, the Harry Gwala Foundation board chair, Panyaza Lesufi says Orania must go. He says the whites-only town's existence is not in the spirit of a democratic, non-racial society.
We understand why that institution was established before. It has lived its time. It's now that that place must be liberated and all South Africans must be allowed to stay wherever they want to stay. We don't say we want to stay with them, but you can't have an institution that is established on the basis of language or on the basis of a color of the skin.
On honoring struggle stalwart Harry Gwala, alliance partners and Gwala's foundation are calling for his grave site to be declared a national heritage site.
He was not a workerist, but he was not also just a Marxist, but he managed to understand and connect the relationship between the class struggle and the national liberation. So we support the call to declare this a national monument.
Something Gwala's family says is long overdue. His daughter is calling on young people to continue the struggle started by freedom fighters.
Njoba wasibamba lesipiye wasibamba shisa wawubamba nomkhonto ushisa manje njoba lo mkhonto sewudedelile sizocela ukuthi bawuthathe lo mkhonto bawubambe nje wayewubambile singawenzeli phansi amandla akhe ngaleyo ndlela ngithi amandla.
A series of events is planned this year to commemorate what would have been Gwala's centenary. This includes lectures to be addressed by current and former leaders of the Tripartite Alliance.
Okay, there you have it. We're going to be talking about this tonight with Joost Strydom, and obviously we're going to be unpacking what is actually going on at Arania. Sorry guys, I just had a little Skype that came through there. Okay, let me get Joost on so we can get the show on the road. Here we go. Hi Joost.
Hi Scott, how are you?
Excellent, thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for having me on again.
You're very welcome. We spoke to you last a couple of months ago, and we talked about the history of Arania, and we talked about where it's at today and where it wants to go in the future, the building of a university and all those sort of things. Now, there's been a complication, and it's a complication depending on how you look at it. And that is the talk by people like Panyaza Lesufi and, of course, Julius Malema. Now, let's just unpack this bit by bit. Last time we talked about the history of Arania, but now there have been complications with the chair of the Harry Gwala Foundation, Panyaza Lesufi, saying Arania must fall. What's your comment about that suggestion?
Scott, firstly, it's not the first politician to say Orania must fall, and most certainly it won't be the last politician to say so. And interestingly enough, about the setting of the comments that were made by the MEC is at the gravesite of Harry Gwala, which was an icon of the struggle, and Panyaza Lesufi felt it relevant to at that stage comment about Orania. And I'm not sure why, to be honest. I'm not sure why specifically he thought of Orania in that context. But from our side, as I said, it is not the first time that a politician tries to hide the failures of socialism in South Africa by using Orania as a distraction to take the lightning for them. It's not the first time that happened. It's certainly not the last. And to be honest, it's not something that's keeping me awake at night at this stage.
Well, that's great to know. And what about the other residents of Arania? How are they taking this?
Well, obviously, as you can imagine, Scott, there was a bit of a uproar or a reaction in the days after the comments that were made by Mr. Panyaza Lesufi. Mostly people were intrigued by why he would go on stage and say things like that. Personally, Orania has never bothered him, or we never actually had any interaction with Mr. Lesofie, and there's not much reason for him to out of the blue come with comments like this. So a lot of people were asking, why on earth would he do this, and why on earth would he make comments like these? Obviously it was the talk of the town for a day or three, and then for the rest of the time we just kept doing what we were doing all the time along, and that's creating a reality, Scott, and that's a very important thing. The fact that Oranians go to work every day and actively make a difference in the existence of Orania, actively put bricks on one another, and actively create and secure a future where Afrikaners have breathing space, because people like Mr. Lesofie is denying us breathing space in the rest of South Africa. So what we do is we're just creating a reality here, and comments like these is not something that is changing reality. But what is changing reality is Afrikaners actively working on a day-to-day basis to create reality in Orania, and that's deeds will always be much more important than words, and building will always be much more important than breaking. What Mr. Lesofie said in his comments is that Orania must fall. Now, it's not the first time that we hear this kind of narrative or this kind of rhetoric about things that must fall. Now, obviously, if something must fall, it's something that has been built. And that brings us to an important distinction, and that is the two mentalities that is alive and well in South Africa, not only in South Africa, but obviously also in the rest of the world. It's not something that's to do with race, or to a large extent not even politics. It's not limited to certain cultures or however, but there are two different mentalities. It's the one of breaking and it's the one of building. And Scott, we subscribe to the mentality of building. Right. And the people who promote things that must fall, they always subscribe to the mentality of breaking, which is obviously not only sad, but also not contributing to anything.
Right, I totally agree with you. I just want to address the side chat and people watching quickly. Look, if this is your first time joining the Loving Life live streams, please do subscribe. We have some really interesting live streams coming up just this week. We're going to be talking to the Smokers Unite, the top people in that organization, tomorrow night, and then we've got live streams every night this week with very, very interesting people. So please remember to subscribe. Now, to put your questions to Joost, all you have to do is just put them into the side chat, and the moderators will cut and paste them later when I'm ready to actually take them. Now, okay, so they've singled out Arania. Okay, now what about the Kingdom of KwaZulu-Natal? That huge area that the Zulu king has now claimed as like a trust that he runs and owns, and it's for the Zulu people. Now, why is that different to Arania?
That is a very good question, Scott, because Mr. Lesofie's comments were specifically regarding institutions built on language, certain institutions that were built on the prospect of language, of a specific language, in our case Afrikaans, and also culture. And he said that is something that cannot keep on existing, and that kind of institutions must be stopped. But obviously, with his act of trying to deny Afrikaners breathing space and living room in South Africa, he also goes he goes ahead and he denies every other culture in South Africa that are proud of their specific language and heritage. He denies them living space as well. He actually goes out and tell those kind of people that there's no space in South Africa for a culture to be unique. You can only be this grey, undefined type of I don't know what, cultureless. And he specifically refers to a non-racial South Africa. The reality in South Africa, Scott, there's different races, there's different cultures. And if we want a South Africa that can keep on existing with harmony between people, you must acknowledge the differences between cultures. You must acknowledge that there are different languages. But now, people in top positions in the ANC tries to keep a country functioning with 11 or 12 official languages, and that just boils everything down to English. So he also denies the Zulus the right to go out and have a unique Zulu language and get education in that language, and mother tongue education. He also denies the Xhosas, the Pedi, the Venda, and so on, by denying the Afrikaner. And Scott, what's very interesting is shortly after the comments that were made by Mr. Lesofie, the Khoisan people actually very strongly opposed the comments that he made, and said that if there's no living room for Afrikaners in Orania, then they are scared that the living room of the Khoisan people in South Africa might also be under jeopardy. And they actually strongly supported Orania. So we can clearly see it's not a question of race. This is a question of a politician trying to not only distract people from his own failures, but also denies citizens of the country the inalienable right to have their own culture and their own language and their own places. And that's what's bothering and scary about this comment. Not specifically only for Afrikaners, but for all cultures in South Africa that are proud of their specific culture and their specific language and so on.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I think what's actually happening is that the ANC are desperate because they're now clutching at straws. You know, you look what happened today in Pretoria, where there was live rounds being fired at strikers. Yeah, in Vermeulen Street. I showed video footage earlier at the start of this the live stream. You know, this is not a country that's healthy and sound. This is a country that's in a state of anarchy. And there was a really cool joke that someone sent me just yesterday. And it involves Ramaphosa and the bank. And Ramaphosa walks into the Absa Bank and he presents his check to the teller. And the teller says, "I'm sorry, sir, but I need identification." And of course, Ramaphosa is rather taken aback and he says, "I am the President of South Africa." And she says, "That's fine, but because of new regulations with the bank, I need identification." And he says, but Ramaphosa answers, "I need the money, and I don't have identification." So she said, "Okay, let's try this one. You know, last week we had Ernie Elson here, and he had no ID, so he got his potter out and a golf ball, and he potted a hole-in-one into a little cup 20 yards away, and we said, okay, that's fine, we know who you are." And then Naspurta came in a few days later. He didn't have his ID. So what he did was he kicked a rugby ball right into my mug, and I said, "Yeah, okay, that's cool. We know that you're Naspurta." And she said, "Now, Mr. President, surely there's something you can do to demonstrate that you are who you are." And the president responds, "I'm not good at anything." So she says, "Okay, Mr. President, we've identified you now. How would you like the money? 200 rands? 100 rand notes?" So anyway, getting back to the desperate situation of the ANC, do you think this is just like a red herring that they're throwing out there?
Scott, I think the total mismanagement that we are seeing with this COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis surrounding it, the amounts of corruption, the amounts of mismanaging, the amounts of hungry people, the amounts of strikes, the amounts of irregular and inexplainable laws that's being forced upon South Africans. The ANC clearly wants to distract the citizens of South Africa from the total mishap that we are seeing. And it's not something to be considered lightly, because the problem with blaming someone else when there's clearly structural and institutionalized problems in the management of a country.
Yeah.
And when you start blaming someone else for that, you very, very quickly go into a very, very dangerous territory. And we've seen it multiple times in multiple countries' history. When a certain ruling class starts blaming other people for their problems, you get to a bad and a dangerous place. And in that light, this idea of distracting people should be condemned in the strongest possible ways. The existence of certain institutions or places like Orania, we are open to having a conversation about that, because as I said, for the past almost 30 years, Orania has been a reality in South Africa. We've created a reality for ourselves. Through the grace of the Lord, we've created a reality for ourselves, and we're growing that reality every day. But we are more than open to have conversations about Orania and why it exists. We have all the answers for that, but we must not mix that in with the other narratives in South Africa regarding things like struggle icons or COVID-19 mismanagement or things like that. We should focus and divide those things in the relevant disciplines that they are. And the constitutional reasons for Orania's existence, or the constitution surrounding that, has nothing to do with anything else except that. So we are more than open having a conversation about Orania. But politicians must not blame Orania for their own failures. Politicians must not use Orania to distract people from the rest of the mismanagement that's going on in South Africa.
Right. Well, I find it so jaw-dropping that the Minister of Health in the province of the Eastern Cape blamed their purchase of those ambulance scooters on apartheid. I mean, how does that work? It's just crazy. Now, getting back to Orania, I mean, it's the only properly working town, I think, in South Africa. If you look at any other town where you've got an ANC government, they're all bankrupt or in administration, money's been looted, and yet you had a situation, I think, about a year ago where someone at Arania, there was a question mark about 60,000 Rand being paid for a vehicle or something like that, and that was news all over South Africa. Do you remember that?
I do remember that vividly, Scott.
And then you look at what's going on under the noses of the mainstream media in South Africa to just about every municipality in the country, and they say nothing.
Very recently, the state actually released the statistics for the mismanagement of funds inside municipalities. And the amount of money, I can't remember from the top of my head, but it is billions of rands that's missing. Just missing, not mismanaged, not corrupt tenders, money that's unaccounted for. Unaccounted for, that they can't give any account of what happened to that financial aid. It's from the state taxpayers' money. And just to refer back to what we were speaking about earlier, I think most citizens of South Africa, most citizens in South Africa that is actually looking around them and seeing what's going on are getting really fed up, not only about the mismanagement of tax money and the total disaster that is the management of COVID-19 in South Africa. I mean, we had I don't know if you saw, Scott, that the BBC actually reported on the utter horrible state of hospitals in South Africa.
The Livingston Hospital in the Eastern Cape.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
So you see that? Sorry?
I said it's disgusting what that hospital looked like.
Oh, yeah. But there's no, almost no local media coverage about that. There's almost no local media coverage about the absurd amounts of corruption. But rather, people are getting blamed. So what I was trying to say is that the most South Africans, regardless of culture or race, that's actually looking around them and seeing what's going on in South Africa are getting fed up about tax money that's being stolen or being swayed away in corruption. They are getting fed up about mismanagement, and they are also seeing through this swallow lies blaming everything on apartheid, blaming everything on Afrikaners, blaming everything on Jan van Riebeeck, blaming all the problems that's in South Africa on white monopoly capital or things like that. I think more and more people are waking up to the idea that the ANC is overplaying their hands.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we're going to have the equivalent of a Arab Spring here in South Africa very soon. And I think it'll be the African population that has had enough of the ANC. I think that's definitely in the wind. Okay, now, what we haven't touched on yet is the comments by Julius Malema of the Economic Freedom Fighters, who suggested that they're going to come and occupy Orania. What's your message to Julius Malema and his mob?
Let's first say, interestingly enough, Scott, Julius Malema actually visited Orania. President Mandela, President Zuma, and actually Julius Malema, they all visited Orania at one stage or another. Julius Malema at that stage still affiliated with the ANC Youth League, not yet created the EFF. And on a separate occasion, the EFF actually visited Orania.
That was during the election, wasn't it?
That was one of the times. That was one of the times.
Yeah.
But they actually visited Orania multiple times, and one occasion actually bussing in EFF voters to come and vote in Orania. But here's the catch, Scott. What they did is they bussed in 2 buses of EFF voters with EFF uniforms to come and vote in Orania. And the total amount of people was something like 34 or 36. And the total amount of EFF votes in Orania was not even 30. So, not even all the people that buzzed in voted EFF. So that was really funny.
That is
some
good.
Of them decided to vote for the Freedom Front Plus or some other party. I'm not sure, Scott, but that was quite interesting. Regarding the other visits of the EFF and Julius Malema, they actually had no reason to be antagonistic against Orania, or even they couldn't find any reason to blow on more hate during their visits, because they were treated professionally, they were treated friendly, we were hospitable, and we actually had a cup of coffee with them, and they ate some cook sisters here in Orania, and they went home, and I'm not sure that they knew exactly what to say afterwards, because we didn't attack them, we didn't mistreat them. Now, firstly, we don't regard surprise visits like that as a friendly gesture.
Yeah.
We don't regard cheap politics as something that is in the spirit of a constructing conversation to build up relations. So we regard that as a bit of a surprise attack, even if it's a political surprise attack, and we don't look kindly on cheap politics in that sense. And I think we had a very straightforward talk to those visitors when they did that, and we said what we wanted to say about that, and they actually left Orania not with further ill intentions. And as I referred to back in the beginning, that in no ways mean that we think that would be the last of politicians attacking Orania. Scott, we are going to see this over and over and over again. But Orania's got a few things to its advantage. The first thing is the fact that regarding land grabs or expropriation without compensation or things like that, Orania is Afrikaner reality that's created in semi-desert. People that have been to Orania will know that Orania is semi-desert. It's the Karoo. It is open, it's dry. There's no natural resources in terms of gold or diamonds or whatever. There's no inherent riches in the land that's just waiting for us to dig up. It's not Natal with the rains or the very fruitful soil. It's not the Transvaal with diamonds and gold and things like that. It's a very unhospitable piece of land. It's very arid, very dry. It's very harsh to live here. So people who want to come and expropriate Orania must first deal with that reality. It's not an easy place to live. The Afrikaners that live here carved out an existence in very, very hard conditions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the fact that Orania is a community. It is a community where we trust each other, it's very high levels of trust inside the community, working together to a common goal. And that's not something to be taken lightly. Every person in Orania is really committed to making Orania their homeland here in South Africa, an Afrikaner homeland here in South Africa. The third thing is Orania is not in a vacuum. It's not without any context. Orania's got a history. It's got a grounding in the law, even in international law, and the fact that we are not doing anything illegal, and we created this reality. It's a fact. The fourth thing, Scott, is the fact that we actually do have good relations with a lot of people in high places, even people in the South African government. And we have had good conversations with a lot of reasonable people that is holding high positions, and we don't take that as something light. We regard the trust that we have of certain people, and I believe we have their trust as well. We regard that as an important thing. And the next and also very heavy thing is the fact that Orania has got a lot of friends, Scott. Not only people like you who actually give us a platform for which we are very welcome. Not only the stream of people that follow Orania online, but people in international countries and governments, people in Belgium, for example, people in Germany. We've got friends in America and in Russia. We've got a lot of friends, obviously Afrikaners in South Africa, that says we cannot yet live there. Maybe we can never live there. But if you touch Orania, you touch all of us. Because Orania is the idea that Afrikaners deserve a place in South Africa where they can have space to breathe, a living space for Afrikaners. And if you take that away, you are messing with a lot of people internationally, but also a lot of Afrikaners in South Africa that's just going to say no. Stop messing with Orania. And that's something that we keep in very high regard. It's also the members of the Orania movement, people who actively contribute to Orania being developed. Actually, our members actually financially give aid to Orania being developed and giving more and more life. Even if they cannot live here yet, they support us physically. So there's a lot of facts that you have to take into account when you start to say things like Orania must fall, or Orania don't have a right to live, or things like that. And to our friends, our international community of Afrikaner and Orania supporters, there will be very heavy reaction if people deny Orania the right to existence.
Right, I get that. Now, clearly, there are a lot of people who would love to move to Orania who live in other parts of South Africa. What's your message to them? Is there room for people to move into the town?
Scott, there's lots of room, but there are some challenges, and the things that people must remember when you come to Orania. You know the famous words of Kennedy. It's not what can I do for my country, but what can not what can my country do for me, but what can I do for my country.
Right.
So someone that's got the prospect of moving to Orania, there's a lot of realities that they must keep into account. Things like a suitable home, a decent job that they can come and make a difference here in Orania. But also what can they bring to the table? Because Orania is not a piece of cake that we can share and all have the very nice and good cake. It's a cake that we must grow. We must make the reality of Orania bigger. And every person who moves here must come and pick up that accountability, must pick up that responsibility, and they must come and help pull this wagon. So every person that's thinking about coming to Orania, there's a lot of options. You can go to our website and look on our website, www.orania.co.za. But firstly, ask yourself, what can I bring to Orania? How can I help create this reality of an Afrikaner homeland? How can I help build out a breathing space for my people here in Orania? Obviously, we, as I said, we're a high trust community. We work together. Just recently, Scott, there's a family here whose house burned down, and the reaction from the community was enormous. Everybody was just looking how they can help, and
Wow.
figuring out ways to contribute. There
That's
was
how it used to be.
food donations every night. There was all kinds of donations. Money was raised by the churches. There was just a massive community process of helping those people. And that's the mentality you must bring to Orania.
Yeah.
What can I come and do here to help the community and expand the community and serve the community? Because we want people here. We want more. We want all Afrikaners to come here and help build. But it is a responsibility that people take up when they move here. It's an important one. It's not without these risks. As I said, there will always be politicians who attack us. There will always be media who attack us. There will always be people who are opposed to us in some way or another. So Orania is not without its risks. It's a safe community to a large extent because of the things that we do right, I hope, and the way we act. But it's also a community. You sign up for something much bigger than just moving to a new town, which might be safe and where you might have a job. It's a calling. I see it as a calling, Scott, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that, because one of the things that I've noticed in life is that if you're a born-again Christian and you do something wrong, my gosh, everybody has a go at you because you're a born-again Christian. Now, Orania is like that. Because it's doing everything right, if something wrong happens, the mainstream media love it. They're just going to blow it up like nothing.
Exactly.
It is an extraordinary situation. Now, talking about moving to Orania, what are the sort of costs that people could be expected to pay to actually move there? I mean, how much is land? Are there builders there who can build a home? What sort of costs are associated with that? Just give people an idea of the cost of setting up a home in Orania.
Scott, to be honest, Orania is so diverse, and not only the type of people, but then also in the economic classes of people who live here. You can, there are some cheap housing, and there are way expensive luxury houses and stuff like that. From the top of my head, there's new development now, ideally placed new development on top of a hill looking over Orania. It's the first kind of development that I have the prices somehow in my head. What happened there was a lot of land movement that had to happen. Large rocks had to be worked out, which was quite expensive, and also all the services had to be installed. And I think, I'm not sure exactly how big the plot is, but I think it's anything from 300 square meters to 450. And I think the prices is between 260 and 360,000 rands for the plot itself. But there's also way cheaper options, and there's also way more expensive options. Also in Orania, we encourage a big variety of building methods. So you have everything from light steel frame housing, which cost about, I think, 3,000 rand a square meter, to typical brick mason building, which is from the top of my head around 7,000 rand a square meter. But we also encourage people with new ideas, cheaper and easier ways to build, to come and bring their ideas, so that there are more options. And people can actually build cheaper, because it's important. We want people to come and live here and create a future for themselves. But the reason why land is so expensive is basic economics, Scott. It's just a huge demand and a small supply. We can physically not service enough new plots quick enough. The municipality is struggling to service new plots fast enough for the amount of growth, and they're doing fantastic work, Scott. They've got very professional technical teams going in and doing the work, but the demand is really sky high, and they are selling the plots faster than they can service them, and obviously there's huge costs associated with the servicing of those plots. But there's also different kinds of developments in Orania. We call it landowner associations, and you can buy into different settings. To the river, a bit away from Orania, on small holdings, small farms, and there's a lot of options with different prices, as I said.
Right. Now, you've got about 2,000 people living in Orania at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, just shy of 2,000 citizens of Orania now.
Yeah. Now, Mervyn asked, can you ask Joost if they have lost anyone to COVID-19 in Orania? Or have you indeed had any COVID-19 cases in Orania?
Scott, luckily we have not lost anyone to COVID-19, and that doesn't mean to any regard that that might not happen. We've got a very good medical team. Actually, our local doctor and his team is doing phenomenal work. Scott, I must say they are creating medical care here at speeds that's unprecedented here in Orania. Paramedic services, emergency medical services, there's 2 ambulances already. The personnel at Orania security services are getting trained medically. We have people that did the COVID courses. So obviously it's still possible, and I will not for one second deny the possibility that someone in Orania might die of COVID-19. That might happen, but I feel very safe in the hands of our local medical team, and I know that they're going above and beyond to make sure that there's the right care facilities, that they have the necessary equipment, and that they have the necessary skill set to service the people of Orania.
Right. Now, how has the lockdown impacted Orania? And I just want to temper that question with the funeral of Zinzi Mandela, where there were hundreds of people attended. There were no masks. They were just milling around. No problem. This happened in, I think it was Fourways on Friday last week. And when you consider that, and you consider the severity of the lockdown, is that lockdown really impacting Orania and business in Orania?
Scott, the early parts of the lockdown, which was strictly enforced or nationally, were by the South African police and military, which wasn't without exploits as well, obviously. But the first part of the lockdown really, I think, had a big impact on the entire country. Still, there's a big impact on things like the wine, and just putting it out there, people support South African wines. The industry is in big trouble. We are producing some of the best wines in the world, and this industry is now under very, very, very harsh lockdown regulations, obviously impacting the economy of those wine farms very, very badly.
Right.
And we are going to lose. We're going to lose the skills and of our wineries. So just putting that out there, support South African wineries. But yes, the first part of the lockdown, I think, had a big economic implication for everybody. I think Orania handled it well. I think we innovated. We made a lot of plans to, for example, keep our school children learning through technology that I think is not even used mostly in the rest of South Africa. We rolled out good systems. One of the schools were already, before the lockdown, they had a system of distance learning. The other school integrated it as lockdown happened to keep our children learning. Also, you know, the supply of construction material, with construction be an important part of Orania's economy, and also an important part of the ability to get people to move to Orania. That was also impacted with the supply chains that were broken. But we brought back quite quickly, Scott, and I must say I think business in Orania is actually doing well. There's a energy of growth in Orania. It's like people it's like they were so frustrated and angry during the first part of the lockdown that there's new energy and new fire in them.
Right. And
they just want to make success happen. So we're seeing a lot of new initiatives. We're seeing a lot of people making plans and going above and beyond to make business. We're actually seeing what's interesting, Scott, is we're seeing a lot of new businesses that's coming to light in Orania. In the past month or so, a lot of new businesses was registered at the Orania municipality. So people have ideas, and it's always been that way, Scott. When our people, when you push them and you try to pressure them and you put them in a bad situation, they just prevail time and again.
Yeah.
the harder they push us, the more ideas we get, and the harder we work. And politicians will never break that spirit.
Right. Now talking about the politicians, are there any state-owned organizations in Arania, which means that people have got to be BEE compliant? Do you have any of those problems in Arania?
No, we don't at this stage. There's there's two things state-wise that happens in Orania. One is obviously voting can take place in Orania, and obviously there's a clinic that is part of a provincial program that also is involved with the medical care in Orania to a small extent.
Right.
But more importantly, as I don't know if we discussed it last time, Scott, but more importantly, the Orania municipality from the year 2000, when we had a constitutional court case with the state, functions as a totally unique, totally individual municipality. And we don't even have municipal elections in Orania. When there's municipal elections, we just vote for our own individual candidates. No politicians in our municipality in terms of party politics.
That sounds like a perfect world to me.
Yeah, the moment you take things like party politics in the way that is happening in South Africa, at least out of municipalities, there's a opportunity to actually run those institutions much cleaner and lose a lot of corruption and so on.
Right.
So it's very important.
Well, I guess just to summarize the political bluster that's come out in the last few months with threatening Arania, we can say that that's just to be blunt, it's just pissing in the wind because nothing's happening. It's just political talk.
Yeah, and we're going to see a lot more of that, Scott. But the people of Orania, as a people that's been, the Afrikaner people of South Africa has been through so much through the ages. And in the last 20 years, we faced so much, 20, 30 years, we faced so much in this country. We are not easily intimidated. We are not people that is going to jump like a scared little animal when someone just says some mean things. To be honest, the more they speak, the faster we build, and the quicker they go on with that break mentality, the more it awakes this flame of the building mentality inside of us. So actually, thank you to Mr. Panyaza Lessufi for not only the free marketing of Orania, the free PR that he gave us, but also thank you for once again waking up this flame of hard work and this flame of building a future for ourselves inside Afrikaners. He's actually igniting that flame with every comment that he makes in those terms. So as I said earlier, Scott, I'm going to sleep like every other night. I'm going to sleep very peacefully tonight.
I think Arania is probably the safest place in South Africa when you look at the crime levels around the rest of the country.
Yeah, I think Orania is safe for a couple of reasons. One of them is the fact that our labor practices, that we do all our own work. And it's safe because of some of our political decisions, but it's also safe because the community takes the responsibility of keep being vigilant and taking responsibility for your own safety and security as a very high priority, and that helps a lot. Every person in Orania is in some or other way is in some or other way involved in the local safekeeping of the community.
Right. Well, look, I just want to say I'm pleased we've had this chat, because we've cleared the air on the blustering of the politicians, which clearly means absolutely nothing. And all it's done is it's built the resolve of people at Arania to build even bigger and stronger. And when you look at what's happening around the rest of South Africa, everything's falling into disrepair and decay. It's quite clear that Arania is a symbol of hope for the Afrikaner people in South Africa.
And isn't that something to live for, Scott?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what I'd like to do at this stage is ask you, Joost, if there's a message you'd like to send out to Afrikaners all over the world, as your position as one of the leaders of the Orania movement. If you'd like to just address them about Orania and anything else that comes to mind.
I very much would like to do that, Scott. Firstly, don't be intimidated, not only by all the things that's happening around the world, all the negative things. Don't be intimidated by people who try to push us down or make us kneel or shove us into positions that we don't want to be. Don't be intimidated by the mainstream whose only message for us is that we are not only welcome in most places or in most roles, but that we also should be taking up responsibility for things that we've never done. So don't be intimidated by that. Don't focus on all the negative things that's going on, firstly. And then secondly, we can only take up as much freedom as we actually go out and manage. We can only we can only live the amount of freedom and security that we take responsibility for ourselves. No international figure is coming to save us. There's nobody that's going to take responsibility for us but ourselves. And the moment that we realize those two things, that even with the whole world and all the media and most of the politicians and everybody against us and trying to as I said, make us kneel before for statues of things or take responsibility for acts that we never committed. Even disregarding that, every inch of ground that we take up and take responsibility for on an ethical and long-lived with clear intentions and good motives, every inch that we take up is ours to keep if we can take that responsibility. And I mean that in terms of creating breathing space for Afrikaner people, creating breathing space for conservative people, creating a reality where we are not being made out to be villains, but where we can be the heroes of our own story.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Now, I'm actually going to be getting another guest on after we've finished. His name is Philippe van Velbergen. He's actually a doctor, and the reason I'm bringing him on at the conclusion of our discussion is because General Isaac van Zyl, who you'd have heard of, is the head of the Boereligion. He had a heart operation about 10 days ago. About 7, it wasn't a quadruple bypass, it was like 7, I don't know what you call that, but 7 veins were literally sorted out. And he is not in a good way. You know, he's in recovery. He was actually going to be coming on for a live stream, but the doctor said no, you can't come on, you're still too vulnerable, and he needs to just relax and gain strength. So what I'm going to do after we finished our discussion is I'm going to get Philippe on to and I hope he's available, because he's going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of what happens after a heart operation. But I just want to say to you, Joost, thank you so much for being with us tonight. You know, I love Orania. I'm probably one of the best ambassadors for Orania, because
I know that
it is such an amazing place, and I love the idea you've got your own money, the Ora. I mean, I just love the uniqueness of that place. It is an extraordinary little piece of South Africa. And as you say, I think if the politicians try to mess with it, there would be a huge international outcry.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you very much for giving us a platform once again to tell the world how we see it, to show the world that politicians won't intimidate us. And thank you for the good work that you are doing by spreading the our side of the story, not only Orania, but conservative, logical thinking people worldwide, and showing also the realities of what's happening in South Africa. Thank you very much for that as well, and I appreciate being on. It's always fantastic speaking to you.
You're very welcome, and if something else comes up that you'd like to get publicized, just contact Marlena and we'll have you on straight away in a heartbeat. Now,
thank you very much.
I'm just going to conclude with a question that Gerard Bielefeld has asked. He says, Joost, verkoop julle dop en smokes nog daar?
Well, Gerard, I cannot in any ways answer that question on behalf of the people that are in those industries. So you'll have to speak directly to them. I won't incriminate them on any way regarding the national laws, and I am very sure that everybody is following the letter of the word.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. All right, Joost, thank you so much, and please take care, and we look forward to having you back in the future.
Fantastic, Scott. Thank you very much.
Okay, ciao for now. Alright guys, that was an interesting discussion with Joost, wasn't it? Now, I'm going to see if I can get Philippe on. Okay, now, as Marlena knows, Philippe has written me an essay here, but let's see if I can get Philippe on so he can talk to us about the do's and don'ts of heart operations. Hi, Philippe.
Hey, Scott. How are you doing?
Okay. Yourself, buddy?
I had a busy day. Very interesting patient from the Scottish Islands. Wait, my COVID mask.
Well, there you go, guys. That's from a top doctor in the UK. That's the type of mask you need to get. Now, Philippe, the reason I got you on is because we're worried about Isaac. You know, he was supposed to come on earlier tonight, but the doctors advised him not to because he was. Okay, we will go through the specifics shortly, but before we do, what are the do's and don'ts, and what are the critical times after you've had a heart operation like Isaac's had?
Well, there are a couple of different systems when it comes to bypasses.
Can you move your camera down a bit?
Yes, this better?
Yeah. Well, I was missing half your face. That's much better. Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. There are actually there are a couple of different systems. It depends where you want to harvest veins. One, I don't know which one he has had, but one of the systems, the Lima system, is particularly safe. 10 days, well, the first thing is, of course, the recovery that needs to be uneventful. And then for 10 days, you're pretty much at risk, high risk. After those 10 days, that risk curve drops significantly. One should then really look after oneself for about a month or so. Should you weather that and there are no complications, no readmissions, no issues, then you should be okay for about 8-9 years. There is about an increase in risk and mortalities after 8-9 years. We don't really know why that happens, probably because you get older and there are other complaints as well that might surface during that time, during that period, and other issues that might unfold. But the honeymoon period is about 8-9 years where you have no difficulties at all, where you really make the most of it. One of the things that I did not understand from what I heard from you with regard to Isaac is that he is smoking. That I can't understand for the life of me. That is one thing he really should not be doing. The other thing is that depending on what they have seen and what they have found, his surgeon and possibly a physio, a specialized physio in cardiotherapy, would give him a regimen, would give him a list with what to do and what not to do, maybe phase in very mild exercise, certainly a diet, lots of rest, or absolute bed rest for a while, depending on how the op went. But this is the period that he really should be looking after himself, and smoking is the very last thing he should be doing, because it's also the oxygen transport that is affected by smoking. And what he needs to do is baby that heart and actually make sure that the oxygen supply to it is optimal. What is very interesting is that he had developed alternative pathways because the blood supply was compromised, and his heart had started to build alternative and complementary pathways to deliver blood to the muscles. That is very interesting. I haven't seen that. That's a new thing, but of course I'm not a cardiologist.
Right.
But one thing is very little excitement, preferably no excitement at all if he can manage it. Small regular meals, and particularly of interest is absolutely no smoking. Yeah, that is a no-no. I don't know where he gets it from, and he gets a new chance on life put together. The channel basically saved Isaac's life, and I would expect him to do his very utmost by not smoking and helping himself as best he can. He's not out of the woods yet. But it depends very much also on what his surgeons found and what their take is on the prescription, on advice for activities or light activities or no activities for a while. Is he at home at the moment?
He's at home, yeah.
And have there been any further complications, or has it been plain sailing for him?
There have been, but I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to talk about them. That's the reason he couldn't come on tonight. But, basically the doctor has suggested he just take it very, very easy. Now, they're not serious complications, but there's certainly something isn't quite right. And I just don't want to talk about it publicly because he's still in a very vulnerable state.
You can't. What I saw, what little I saw of him was that he was in a state of great excitement when he was talking about the situation in South Africa and what the Boer Legion was going to do and what he was going to do when he was back on his feet and basically pushed a lot over the hill. One of the things his doctors, and certainly I wouldn't like to see, is that he raises his blood pressure by getting overly excited and upset about stuff. That blood pressure needs to be regulated, very stable, and within a very safe margin. And what I saw of him, that is not what he was achieving there. He must be very careful with that.
Right. Look, Isaac is far too important a man for South Africa to have some complication impact him in a way that he can't do what he's doing. And this is why we're having this discussion, because I think some straight talking about what he should do and what he shouldn't do from you, and you are a top doctor in the UK, could just help him, because maybe he hasn't been told these things.
He really should stop smoking, and I'm very sad to hear that he hasn't, because that is something that will put him at risk, and it would very severely impact the oxygen supply. The blood gases, the oxygen supply, and he actually places himself at huge risk with that. My advice to him with what little I know of what was done, would be bed rest, no excitement, small meals, lots of rest, lots of sleep, certainly not get involved in political issues, but spend probably 3 months recovering, and get his health back, his overall health back.
Right.
That would be critical. That would be really, really critical for him. The more he looks after himself now, the more payback he will get later. Yeah, the more he can load himself later.
Right.
And particularly, well, I know a little bit about quadruple bypasses. What he has undergone, I'm not sure of. But that is a very, very, very major intervention.
Yeah.
And it's quite a lot of recovery. But the smoking thing is an absolute no-no, and getting excited and wound up about stuff is something that he must avoid at all costs.
Yeah, I think, Malina, what we should do is just not have Isaac on the live stream for a while, because we don't want him to get excited and put him in that sort of position. At what point in time, roughly, do you think he would be okay to be on a live stream with us?
If he doesn't get overly excited and he manages to control his smoking is doing his heart, the vessels, absolutely no favors, and he sticks to whatever regimen they have given him, that they will have given him a recovery regimen of things to do and not to do at home. And he must stick to that. Yeah, if he gets complications now, the bypasses are the least of his problems. The other thing I don't know is the elasticity. Yeah, I'm trying to keep it understandable. Vascular elasticity, the ability of arteries to expand and contract with the beats. Yeah, if those vessels are very stiff, we're talking about the stiffness index and these things, then what he can do is use a very good supplement. We actually make the stuff ourselves. It's called arginine, L-arginine. And arginine is a precursor to not nitrous oxide, that's laughing gas, but nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a component that helps blood vessels that are under pressure to be pliable, to be elastic, if you will. And it's a hell of a lot safer for them to be that way than to be very stiff, because then you can get problems with weak spots ballooning out, aneurysms. He could, if his surgeon is happy with that, get onto supplementation of arginine. The arginine with the nitric oxide improvement will really baby those blood vessels and others that he has as well, because it's not, the stiffness will not only be, the plaque will not only be in his heart region, it will be everywhere. So the arginine as a supplement, the L-arginine, would be very helpful. It would certainly not do any damage.
Right.
And it would protect, if he has very stiff arteries, it would actually protect those arteries and render them more pliable, more elastic, more softer, if you will. They will give more when the heart beats, when the blood pressure goes up. That is one thing I would suggest that he does. But he should really talk to his surgeon and get his take on it. I'm sure his surgeon will support it.
Yeah.
But the smoking thing is not doing him any favors.
Yeah.
Lots of rest, no smoking, small meals, very, very moderate exercise, if any. I don't know what he has been given as a package to do. I would be amazed if for the first 2 weeks he would be doing any exercise at all. He should really give himself time to heal. I would get him on the channel if he doesn't get too excited in probably a month. That would really give him time to strengthen up, to heal. He will have scar tissue from the op. That will give time. That will get time to consolidate and scar tissue to organize, to consolidate. It will be a hell of a lot safer for him after, say, 3 weeks to a month. But certainly, again, no overexcitement, and that smoking has got to stop. That is asking for a lot of trouble.
Right. Okay. Well, look. So we're talking about the end of August.
We were on live streams together with Isaac.
Yeah, you were. That's why I was hoping if he was coming on tonight, you could both be on. Yeah.
Yeah. We got on very well together.
Yeah.
And of course, having served in the police reserve, and Isaac having been a full colonel, I have a lot of respect for the man and for his rank. And I really do wish him the very best. I really, really wish him well. But the situation, such as it presents in South Africa at the moment, is doing his blood pressure no favors. And that is one thing he really needs to look into and protect himself.
What would be the symptoms of high blood pressure that might show physically?
Okay. I don't know if what medication he is on to help regulate that. I don't know what medication he is on at all. He would be on anti-inflammatories. He would be on prophylactic antibiotics. I'm not sure what he was on before he had the op. But for a couple of bucks, you can get a sphygmomanometer, a blood pressure meter. And one of the problems that might arise, interpreting these things is not that difficult. But one of the things that I look for with a patient, that there's a whole thing about high blood pressure, and numbers are not everything. They really aren't. But what interests me when I get the numbers is the gap, the disparity between the systolic, which is the pressure when the heart beats, the higher one of the two readings, and the diastolic when the heart is at rest. Now, if the systolic is highish, 140, 150, and the diastolic is also high, then we're looking for fairly clogged up arteries. Keep it simple. But worse is if the lower pressure, the diastolic, when the heart is at rest, is around 80, 70, 80, maybe 80 and a little bit, and the pressure under load when the heart beats sits around 140, 150. That basically suggests that these blood vessels cannot give way, cannot open up when blood is pumped through them under pressure, that they are stiff. And that is a bad place to be.
Right.
That is a very bad place to be. The other bad place is when the systolic and diastolic pressures are very close together, but they would never have discharged them if that were the case. That is a very bad place. But a very large gap between the arteries under load, when the heart is beating, when it beats and pushes blood through, and a massive gap between that and when the heart is at rest. That suggests very often that there is arterial stiffness, and that needs looking into. That is a very high risk factor. If there is a weak spot somewhere, you can get aneurysms. The other thing that we run into here, which is very dangerous, is arterial dissection, which is when the artery starts damaging itself, particularly the abdominal aortic arch in the tummy. It's very sore, and that pain can be referred to a different place. And when that packs it in, when that causes damage, it's a very short-lived party. Yeah, you pretty much die. If you get to a hospital and you get a good vascular surgeon to look at you, you have a window where repairs can be made, which is an expert job. But if it is missed, and it very often is, then you don't survive that. And smoking is a major contributor to arterial dissections. In other words, when the artery starts leaking into itself and damages itself.
Right.
And that is something he really must avoid, and he must give himself every opportunity to heal over. And smoking is an absolute, that is a no-no.
Marlena's just said, at present, Isaac does not suffer from high blood pressure, rather from a low blood pressure.
Low blood pressure may be induced by the medication. To keep that load off the repairs that have been done. It could also be an indication that the heart itself, I don't know, I have no information about that, but then I start looking at the performance of the heart itself as well. Yeah, the cardiac incompetence. Yeah, if the heart is in all its chambers is doing what it needs to do. If it is very tired, it's a muscle, and there are all sorts of structures in there.
Right.
The other thing is, I'm sure that if they picked up that there were issues with valves, they would have attended to them at the time as well. So I don't know if there is a murmur, if he's ever mentioned the word murmur.
Don't think so.
Leaking valves. But that may well be induced by the medication that he is on to keep the pressure off.
Right.
But that would also make him tired.
But he's still in that 10-day period. This is day 9 since the operation. So he's still in that very vulnerable period, isn't he?
The first 10 days, and it's not exactly 10 days. That is a sort of average. He is in a very vulnerable position at the moment, and he may well be for another week or 2 weeks. Does Marlena know if he is actually still smoking? I just hope he isn't.
Well, I have to tell you, I just saw what looked like smoke when we went live the other night after the operation, and I might be mistaken. I mean, he might be off the smokes, and I hope he is. But your advice is so valuable that it's important that he doesn't do that. Now, I just want to put something else to you.
The other thing that he might want to consider is keep visitors out as much as possible. Don't get opportunistic infections.
Right.
And a mask in his case is not a very good idea. Generally, you're looking at a minimum oxygen content that you need of about 19%. That's a minimum.
Yeah.
When you wear a mask, that is generally reduced to about 17%. So you're looking at hypoxia, at the lack of oxygen, and that is the last thing he wants as well. So if he could be in a situation where he's not threatened by opportunistic infections and he doesn't have to wear a mask, then he helps himself a lot more as well.
Yeah.
The mask is not going to do him any favors. It will drop the oxygen percentage the body breathes in by about 2%. And that's not a good place to be after what he's been through.
Right. Okay, well, look, Philippe, thank you.
He had a lung function problem, I think. Didn't he have one collapse?
Yeah, one lung collapsed, yes.
He didn't tolerate the anesthetics gas.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know in how far that has resolved. But if he can stay away from masks and stay away from opportunistic infections, he would help himself as well. And get the arginine.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Philippe, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your words of wisdom with us. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And guys, I'm going to wrap up the live stream in a minute. I know we've had 2 totally different guests on. We've had one of the leaders of the Orania Movement, and now we've had a top doctor. Now, okay, just Fiona says, to continue the previous question, Lana says he has a Stanford type B Arctic dissection. What's that?
Who does?
I'm just trying to find the rest of the question. Okay. Please ask the doctor if my husband can use arginine. He has had a dissection. Will it help him?
Has he had an arterial dissection? And was that repaired?
I guess so, yeah.
Well, he should be, yeah. There are very few contraindications for it. Oddly enough, one of them is schizophrenia, and that's certainly not the case with an arterial dissection. But in the case of schizophrenia, for example, the use of arginine, supplementation of arginine is not recommended.
Right.
But yes, he could. He could.
Okay.
As far as I know, it's actually for sale in South Africa. There was a lot of work done through the, I think it's called the High Desert Hospital. I think it was in Arizona, or where is the gambling paradise?
Oh, yeah, that's Arizona. You're talking Las Vegas.
Yeah. There is the three guys who know more about arginine than anything else, and they've been running trials and treating people with very severe conditions with great success, and they've published a lot as well. And the lead guy there has a CV that is really he's a heavyweight.
Right.
And a lot of that stuff that's published is well worth reading. But with the arterial dissection, which has been successfully repaired, he could benefit from arginine, yes.
Okay, now Fiona says, Lana says no repair. So I'm not sure what she's talking about there. It's hard because you can only put 200 characters into a comment.
An arterial dissection is a medical emergency.
Yeah.
It's a very serious medical emergency.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that he has an arterial dissection and is not straight into theater. It's a medical emergency.
Right. All right.
But it's difficult to give advice.
Yeah, it's hard to know when you don't know the exact facts, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's hard to give advice when you don't have the exact facts in front of you.
Yeah, but I cannot imagine somebody walking around in a state of arterial dissection.
Yeah.
It is as painful as hell. It is a very, very painful condition. It's what we would call exquisite pain. It's a medical emergency. He would be admitted immediately.
Yeah.
So it's either not an arterial dissection or it has been repaired. He can't walk around with that. It's just not on.
Right. Alrighty.
Anything else?
That's it, Philippe. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's, as I say, it's always a pleasure to have you on and get advice from you. I hope that Isaac will listen to this at a later stage and take note of your advice to him, because it's really important, as I said earlier, that this man is healthy, because he's going to play a huge role, I'm sure, in the future in South Africa, and he's an inspirational guy, and we need to look after him.
If Isaac wants to Skype me, he has my Skype details, or he should have.
Yeah.
He's welcome to it. I'll chat with him.
Okay, fantastic.
And if I'm busy with patients, then I'll come back to him when I have a gap.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I'll ask Marlena to let him know.
Yeah, I'd like to see him make it hale and hearty as well. Yeah, I wish him all the very, very best and speedy recovery.
Okay, guys, look, I'm going to shut down the live stream now. I just want to say thank you all for joining us, and to the moderators, thanks, guys, for looking after the side chat. To our special second guest, Philippe. Philippe, thank you so much once again for your advice.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Scott.
And I'm going to shut down the broadcast now. And don't forget, tomorrow night we have another broadcast at 8 p.m. And we're going to be talking to the Smokers Unite group. Funny enough, seeing that we've just been talking about smoking, because on Saturday they're having a huge protest. I think the main protest is going to be in Cape Town, but we'll be talking to them tomorrow night about that. And Reino de Beer will also be joining us as well. And of course, he's from the Liberty Fighters Network. So we're going to have a full program tomorrow night. All right, guys, please